It's Christine Wilson and Saphira Galoob, and you'll thank us later. Tune in every week and hang out with us because we're a lot of fun.
And no topics off the record, we decided. We are open to talking about everything together with a bit of a sense of humor, a lot of self-forgiveness, a lot of grace, and always being wiser on the other end. Bring it on, girls and boys.
You know what? You'll thank me later that I'm telling you about this. You'll thank me. They're going to hate us, Saphira. It's going to be nuts.
Well, good morning, podcast man, and my dear friends, my sister podcast friends for your Thank Us Later. How are we this morning?
I'm a little rough. I think I'm on day 2 of recovery from taking 9 17-year-old boys to the beach.
Yeah, that's going to require a full-on reentry vacation. We can talk about vacations from vacations.
Yeah, this was, I have to tell you, it went so well. My friend Angie came with me, who's another mom of one of the boys, and we had the coolest house. It was like big, huge loft, and it was huge. And we gave the boys enough of a leash that they could have fun, but not enough that they could get arrested, vomit on themselves, get anyone pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
At least I think.
Those are the main things, and not necessarily in that order.
Exactly. So, and they had such a good time. I mean, just hours and hours and hours on the beach playing games and talking to cute girls. And they were really happy. Angie and I had each other, so we were happy. We, the first night, walked down to one of my favorite places in Rehoboth called Diego's. And it's a gay bar with a great dance floor. And we just danced like nobody's business. I mean, we had a blast. People bought us drinks. People hung out with us. I met a guy who was a vet and had sold the Rehoboth veterinary practice down there. And he gave me advice on the cat. So anyway, it was fabulous. But today I actually feel worse than yesterday.
I hope the mothers whose children you took send you a big old present.
I think they just think I'm nuts. And they're like, why would you do that? And I wouldn't do it, which I get it. My mother never would have. My mom would have been like, you're just
we did
liability.
That for Lucas Friends for Beach Week, and it's a big lift. So you're a super mom this week for sure. And you know, speaking of super moms, we were talking about moms because we as moms and our age group, sorry, Cody, Nicole, and Courtney, you're not quite in our age group, count as some of the most kind of curious and biggest market for cannabis, which is the topic today. We're going to talk all things cannabis. And we actually think that we're going to have more than one podcast on cannabis because, one, we just think the topic is so vast and there's so many questions and so much curiosity about it. But today we're going to talk about legality. There's some really appropriate things happening in the news all the way from last Friday night when the Wall Street Journal article came out reporting that President Trump is considering a reschedule of the classification of cannabis from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3, and the subsequent news that followed all the way into the press conference yesterday when he was asked about it and mentioned that he is going to be considering this historic change in the legalization of cannabis in the next few weeks. So, you know, I want to talk about what it means, what it doesn't mean, what it means for people who want to be consumers, people who are not consumers now, and just any questions you may have. We're going to really work to have a medical doctor on in the coming weeks or in a month or so, just to talk a little bit about what you need to know if you're new to cannabis and how to understand it both as a medicine and a plant medicine and kind of something that has intoxicating effects, but could be a really beneficial and for many people alternative to a lot of the prescriptions that we've relied on. So to frame that, I think we should get started.
I love it. I have to tell you, I sit around with groups of women, middle-aged women, and it's so funny. One of them will be like, I found this new CBD cream and it made my knees feel better. And, and everybody, they're all talking about cannabis in different ways. And the lack of knowledge about why would a change from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3 federally be a big deal. And Saphira, thanks to you, Courtney and Nicole and I know a lot about cannabis. We came into working in the cannabis space. We do marketing in cannabis. We work with you and your team. we probably know more than the average bear about it. But Cody, I'm guessing you're like schedule what?
Yeah, I was already going to ask you. I have no idea what that means. Is it actual about schedulings, or that's just like what the laws are called?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the schedule is basically a list that was created in 1971 that designated drug categories on most dangerous to less than dangerous, Schedule 1 to Schedule 5. And cannabis was placed on Schedule 1 as being the most dangerous. And essentially, the characteristics of being on Schedule 1 is having no medicinal benefits and being highly, highly addictive. So heroin, for example, is on Schedule 1.
Right.
Meaning that at that time, and since 1971, the federal government has considered that cannabis is as dangerous as heroin, which we all right now know and go, no.
Incorrect.
And incorrect. And the fact that it also is alleged, at least, or our understanding now of medical benefits. I think we all know somebody who has benefited from having access to cannabis for medicinal reasons, whether it's to help to go to sleep or to help with inflammation or to help with, whatever the symptom. That there's a lot of symptoms, but because it's been on a Schedule 1 status for so many years, for decades and decades, researchers have had significant limitations in how they've been able to research this drug. And Christine mentioned CBD. One of the things we should understand that the cannabis plant is made up of let's just say well over 100 constituents. And CBD, cannabidiol, is one of the constituents that does not have an intoxicating impact on your body. In 2018, that constituent was actually pulled out from Schedule 1 and made legal. So if you are, and it was made legal because cannabis cultivators were able to grow cannabis in a way that had very, very, very small amounts of THC. THC is the constituent that does have an intoxicating effect, but growers were able to grow it where you could have high CBD and low THC. And in 2018, they made that type of cannabis, hemp is the name that we all know it to be, legal. Now, it's really, really important to know that since then, manufacturers have taken that legal hemp plant and reconfigured it with chemicals and synthetics and created an entire product category of intoxicating cannabinoid products that are not sold within the regulated market, but they're sold in gas stations and vape shops and convenience stores. So if you out there are purchasing what you think is a cannabis product outside of a lawful dispensary, meaning you're buying it in a vape shop, in a convenience store, frankly, in a wine store, that is not regulated cannabis. That is developed from this legal hemp. And while some of those manufacturers have good practices, they are not regulated. The products are not tested. The tracing of the workflow, or they call it seed to sale, or basically the supply chain, is not tracked. They are not licensed, and it may be okay, and it may not be okay.
And those are things like Delta 9.
Yes. I don't really want to get into the whole science of Delta 8 and Delta 9 and when things, that kind of gets...
for the names for...
Yeah, Delta 9. Yeah, D9.
Right?
Correct.
Kratom too?
Kratom is a completely different constituent. Yeah, kratom is a completely different constituent. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, when you said like this fugazi hemp in the vape shops,
yeah,
what kind of product is that? Like, is that actual something you smoke, or is it like a lotion? Like, what are...
So when you're buying things outside of dispensary, outside of the regulated market, the normal product categories, I've not seen D9 in a lotions. I mean, you will see, we can talk a little bit about CBD's lotions, and that's kind of, we'll call that's going to be a separate product category. But it's like definitely vape pens. You can get flour, gummies, other types of candy-ish, things that are put more in a mints, gum. But the biggest growth is in the beverage category.
Yeah.
So THC beverages, which Total Wine now carries, and many of your national chains are carrying it. But let me be clear, the THC that is in that is not coming from the marketplace that licensed cannabis operators. Now, it doesn't mean to say that it's all bad. It's just not coming from an environment that has the strict standards. So you're basically only as good as your manufacturer.
It's not regulated or tested the same way.
So it's not correct.
Yeah.
I saw a THC drink on a menu at a restaurant last week.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, so they're just everywhere now.
Yes. And let me also be clear, these are not FDA approved products, because normally when you would have a product that you consume in the human body, the FDA would normally have oversight. So this product category is operating outside FDA approval. Many states, as you may know, many states are kind of stepping in to decide whether or not this product category is correct or not correct. So, for example, Texas is in a big fight on whether or not this is allowed or not. North Carolina, I mean, well, there's activity in almost every state. But just because it's on the shelf doesn't necessarily mean it's safe. And the one thing you can say about the regulated cannabis industry is if they are licensed by their state, which is how they're operating, even though it's federally illegal, we could say around 40 states, depending on 40 states have a commercial pathway towards selling these products. Every state that has a commercial permissions has the oversight on the supply chain, testing, enforcement on packaging, so safety on packaging, labeling on packaging.
So that if you're having 5 milligrams, it's going to be similar to the 5 milligrams you had before, not just a whole different amount of THC where you feel horrible.
Right. So if you're ordering your product on the internet, not a regulated environment. I don't care how fancy the website is.
So, Saphira, this is one of the things that I was at a concert recently with a bunch of women, and they said to me, they were talking, and the misinformation they were sharing, I had to jump right in. So one of the things is you walk into a shop, a store, and it looks...
A vape shop. We're not talking about a dispensary.
Yeah, but sometimes they're not even a vape shop. Like I've been into, I mean, maybe they are technically a vape shop, but like you walk into something that doesn't look like a smoke shop, and they're selling T-shirts, but you buy your T-shirt and then they give you a rolled joint as your free gift.
Yeah. So this is a very specific paradigm of the District of Columbia, because the District of Columbia, because it's subject to federal law, is not allowed to commercialize cannabis recreationally. You can get a medical card and go into a dispensary for medical products, but the we'll call it the loophole, or the way around, is the DC law does allow gifting. So the way that they've done it is you can buy a T-shirt for an exorbitant amount of money, or $35, $40, and they will gift you some cannabis.
Ooh, that's crafty.
Yeah.
Very crafty.
And another thing that I've learned, certain states, and I'll just give the example of the one that I actually talked to someone that was frustrated by it, but in California, they were estimating, this person who spoke to me, and Saphira, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, that about 2 out of every 3 dispensaries that you're going into, they're not actually dispensaries. 2 out of every 3 are actually illegal, not licensed by the state, should not be there. But there are so few, they don't have enough people to regulate this. And as soon as they shut it down, it pops right up 2 blocks over in a new building with a new LLC. And so when you go in and you think you're making a safe choice, you're actually 2 out of 3 times not.
Yeah.
So
I would even say, take New York City. It's probably 1 out of 10 times you're in a legal dispensary. The number of illicit shops in New York is, the multiplier is so high. I don't know what the latest number is. I wouldn't, if I gave the latest number, I'm sure I would be off, because it's so much more. And enforcement is very, very difficult. And you're right, a lot, because they've decriminalized the activity, there's no really teeth in violating the law. So being a smart consumer is pretty important. For those of you out there who've listened kind of from the beginning, you may know that I work as a lobbyist and an advocate for changing laws, and I do so on behalf of the United States Cannabis Roundtable. And if you want to know what companies are the top actors, you can go on to the United States Cannabis Roundtable and look about us and see the companies that are leading this charge. And they are some of the larger companies, and there are smaller companies, single state operators that are great. But I think the consumer has got a lot more responsibility to make sure they are purchasing safe products at this moment than almost with any other product category.
And I thought one of the most interesting thing is, I remember you and I think Courtney were working on a project where you did a display down on the Hill for for all of our folks, our congressmen and women, to understand the fact that our children are being marketed to with products that look like Skittles or Starburst, and they have cannabis in them. Can you tell us about that? And how is that happening?
So this is an example. So earlier on in our discussion, I shared that when the Farm Bill in 2018 legalized CBD, and then I said that there were some manufacturers that figured out a way to use a synthesizing chemical lab-made conversion and make that legal hemp into an intoxicating product, and that synthetic THC from legal hemp has been used to create products and placed in convenience stores and vending machines and gas stations. And that's where our children are accessing these products. And many of the bad actors are using, marketing techniques that just make it look like regular old candy. And that's what is very problematic. And listen, regulated cannabis cares about that a lot, as do health and safety, public health and safety officials. And that's really right now one of the big things we're fighting on Capitol Hill. And
kids are clearly getting vapes. I mean, I know that all the teenagers can get a THC, a cannabis vape anytime they want it. It doesn't seem like there's obstacles at all in place for the children. And so one of the things that I think about when we look at better laws from a federal perspective is more regulation that actually could be safety for all consumers, right? Yeah. For us middle-aged women who don't know better, walk into a store and say, oh, look, that THC drink is orange and bubbly and looks cute. I'll bring it with my friends. Down to my teenager who is walking in and buying Delta 9 or whatever. And, not saying that mine are, but any teenager, hypothetically.
If you have a 16-year-old kid and you say, is it easier for you to go to a liquor store or even it's easier for you to go to the gas station to buy a 6-pack of beer or to buy this, intoxicating product category into candy, he'd be like, oh, I can get the candy easy, but I can't get a beer.
Yeah.
And that's because the beer and the alcohol and the spirits and the wine is all within a really regulated environment that is age gated and designated. There's a huge consequences for selling to children, because there is one, confusion by lawmakers, but there's also there's a really dynamic environment, because if you can imagine, if you're like part of the arbitrage of this industry that came up after hemp was legalized, and you're making a boatload of money and you don't have any of the restrictions and obstacles for getting into the market, so you didn't have to get a license from the state. You didn't have to follow any kind of regulations once your business is up and going. You don't have any tax burdens because your industry is not taxed in any special way. And you're making just billions of dollars. You're going to fight really hard to stay alive. Whereas regulating cannabis, it is like hugely expensive to get a license, to build a facility that is correct, to set up a supply chain that is compliant, to maintain the regulatory standards along every step of the supply chain. And then here's something crazy: business owners or folks that know about the way businesses are run normally a business in our country is allowed to take their top line revenue and deduct their customary normal business expenses, and then their tax on net income. In cannabis, because it's a Schedule I drug, there's a pesky little provision that says that cannabis businesses have to pay taxes on their top line revenue and can't take their expenses. So for many cannabis businesses, they're paying upwards of 80% of every dollar that comes in. So let me just say, so when you give the cannabis business your dollar, they could be paying the federal government 80% of that. When you give the convenience store, the vape shop, $1, they're paying 15% in taxes. So who's going to have more money at the end of the day to fight against change? Obviously, the unregulated D9 synthetics, I call it gas station weed people.
Yeah, right.
So
the ones that I'm scared of, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm scared for my friends to try it and not know what's going to happen. I'm scared for the kids. I mean, I'm a very, very, very moderate cannabis consumer. I've always had sort of a hit or miss experience with it, but there's no way I'm putting anything in my body that I don't buy myself from a regulated dispensary, because I have this knowledge, and I've been scared straight. I'm not taking somebody's gummy out of their purse at a concert. I'm not doing it. Yeah. I hold a license in Virginia. Mm-hmm. And Virginia, I actually had to go on. It took about 3 minutes with a doctor. We talked a little bit about potential symptoms and things that I had that could be treated with cannabis. I was sent my pharmaceutical license, and then I know where there's actually a regulated dispensary that I can go into and buy safe products. I also know wonderful people that own a legal dispensary in DC. And DC does allow for what's called self-certification. So I can go in and certify that I have a medical need for it and walk away with product the same day. And I can do that in DC, even though I live in Virginia. So people in DC can do that. People from other states can do that.
Yeah, you can do that internationally.
Yeah, so people from all over the world can come into DC and go to a legal dispensary.
And buy a temporary medical card and purchase their cannabis. Yeah.
So those are the only places I'm okay with getting product. But that is only because I have this inordinate amount of knowledge that I've realized most people don't have.
Yeah. It's really fascinating. I was in Texas, and I have good friends in Texas that are part of the police force. There's one gentleman, he's a sheriff in one of the communities outside of Austin. And he's like, yeah, we don't even enforce anymore because it's just so ubiquitous. But I was talking about this whole D9 and gas. That's not legal. He had no idea that there was a difference between what you could buy in a gas station and a convenience store and what you could buy in a dispensary. He was like, what do you mean it's not the same thing? What do you mean that's not regulated cannabis? Like he could, yeah. Cody, you're saying.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it is not regulated.
So Cody, I mean, just out of curiosity, I know you're not a cannabis consumer, but do you know where people that get it? Like, are they doing dangerous things?
I'm literally going to have a talk with some of my friends, because I have friends who are into it, and they'll say oh, I'm going to the dispensary in whatever town. I'm going to look up today, where they're going, because I didn't even know this was a thing. So as the average person who knew nothing about this, how would I find, is it online, the regulated places? Is there just a list for your area, or how do you find where to go?
So it depends on your state. It depends on your state. I mean, every state that has a regulated market will have a kind of an oversight body, and they list dispensaries kind of, on differently on their website. But, I think that one, you can ask us for sure. And two, you can just, now with what's online, you can find out if somebody's regulated or not.
Well, there is, Nicole, you probably remember this. There's the app that has
Abra?
What is it?
Is it Abra that you're thinking of?
Maybe, but there's a website where you can go, it might be Abra, but ultimately you can go and see what are actual regulated dispensaries in your state. And here's one of the biggest horrible things for consumers. Every single state that has some sort of legal opportunity, it's different. The rules are different. How it's set up is different. The language they use can be slightly different. So literally, we all don't just sit in one state and never move, right? So that's part of the problem, is where we are and where we go, things are different. And so I feel like there's actually an app you can download, and it's like where to buy cannabis near me, and it tells you exactly what you're getting yourself into, like that it's, and I don't think it even lists gas station options.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that should be. I mean, there was because there's some, like Leafly, for example, has a pretty broad map. And there was some issues around allowing unregulated providers. I mean, like, people just want to make sure that, you've got a regulated provider. I think one other thing to clarify is that as Christine mentioned, activity is governed by state, and it is illegal. It is illegal to transfer for example, a Maryland dispensary to sell their products in Virginia. So that means if you find, for example, a gummy that you really like, in the state of, I don't know, Missouri, and then you come to Virginia or you come to DC and you want to buy that same gummy at a different dispensary, you may not be able to do that. Which is very frustrating for the consumer, because we start to become comfortable with brands and brand quality. Now, one of the things that has happened is that you take a brand, I'll use Wild. It's one of my favorite brands. And they do have presence in every state, but what they do is that they make arrangements, they make agreements with manufacturers on a state-by-state basis to have their formulations created within that state, and there's consistency state by state. But they themselves, as a brand, and they're a great gummy. It's a great gummy to start with if you are kind of new, because they have 5 milligram, very consistent formulations, very clean formulations. But absolutely, it can be frustrating for someone to say that, this formulation works for me and I can't get it, and I can't buy it in another state. That brand doesn't exist in another state.
And I have had, even among a brand that I do trust and that I bought before, I have had very different experiences with 5 milligrams. I've had a 5 milligram no response experience and a 5 milligram, oh my gosh, experience.
Yeah.
So,
and part of that could be the way your endocannabinoid system is, because you can up in your system. Yeah, but but I think
I've had some challenges with the edibles. I think, okay, so tell me if I'm right or wrong. Weed Maps, I think, does have a list of dispensaries.
Oh, that's right. It was Weed Maps. It wasn't Leafly.
Leafly, I think, does too, but Weed Maps has been...
And Weed Maps, what I don't know, Weed Maps was started in California, and they were big. California, Colorado, they were big West Coast. I don't know if they've come nationally yet.
I'm on Weed Maps website right now, so I can see, it has my location. And so where I'm at in North Carolina, it's
not legal.
Correct. So there's that. That's the interesting thing, is one pops up in Western North Carolina on the Weed Maps app, which is, that to me is a red flag, just because
it should be.
It is illegal. So that's the thing you're running into, is even platforms like this.
Well, and I'll tell you,
some states might show you the correct places. Here in North Carolina, to me, that's a flag.
Absolutely. And let me tell you, we've had issues with Weed Maps because they were showing in California businesses that didn't even have a license within that state. And how as a legal business, as a regulated business, as a licensed business, how do you compete with somebody who is, not having to follow any of the rules? Like that, just that lack of parity, or that lack of enforcement on parity, it messes up the whole, it upsets the whole apple cart. So but I will say, just for the general public, I mean, we are still a very nascent industry, if you think about it. And if you look at, historical prohibition of products, I mean, we're going to get there. And the fact that this is born out of the states, and states have a real stake in the outcome of their respective program, is going to be good for all of us. But we are in a very delicate time, because some of these these consternations are being worked out real time.
Right. Well, and I mean, I think I work with so many businesses in cannabis. So, so there's the consumer concerns, there's the business concerns. So the high rate of taxing, the inability to get loans, the inability to bank normally. So I also see a lot of the smaller businesses, which we had planned for this to have some sort of social justice component, and having people who maybe had been inordinately hurt by the criminalization of cannabis get some sort of equity in all of this with our emerging business. And we're seeing, so what I see is so many big companies are the only ones with the money. They're coming in and they're buying up these little guys. We also then as consumers are going to have less of that small shop, local kind of, opportunity with dispensaries. Not to say the big businesses are bad, but, I just think that right now we're seeing so much in the space that is really hard on a business owner. And, I feel for them as a small business owner. If you have no line of credit, you have no ability, and you have extremely high startup costs. You have to show that you have a place to sell. You've got, if you're growing, you got to
$1 million
Yeah.
is what you at minimum. And I'll tell you, the other thing that is so sad about the social equity is that there was this big move several years ago to make sure state programs offered licenses to individuals who were disproportionately impacted or who are minorities. And many of the people from those communities, they don't have high net worth friend circles. If they were formerly incarcerated, they may not have ever owned a home. So imagine trying to put that money together. Okay, so let's say you put that money together. That is like all of your money. Like all of your money, all of your friends' money, all your family money, and then you put it in. But if you're a business owner, you know that most all businesses need cash flow assistance along the way. You need access to lines of credit. You need access to additional sources of revenue, whether it's equity or debt, and that doesn't exist because with the schedule being Schedule 1 and illegal, so follow this line of reasoning, friends in podcast land. Cannabis is a Schedule 1. It's illegal. Banks and financial institutions in our country are subject to federal laws. And those federal laws say, hey, banks and financial institutions, it is illegal for you to offer regulated financial services to anybody who is trafficking in illegal activity. Meaning, banks and credit unions, it is illegal for you to offer banking services to anybody who is participating in an illegal activity. That means by the letter of the law, because me, Saphira Gloom, is getting my money from an organization whose dues come from cannabis, and cannabis is an illegal activity. Just call it fruit of the poisonous tree, friends. I shouldn't be able to get banking. Now, I do have banking because of kind of the way that there are some banks that will bank with us, but they don't have to. And there's a really narrow reason why some banks do. But if you can imagine, if you're back to that Black-owned business or that women-owned business or that minority-owned business, they just can't go into a bank like they normally could and say, listen, I'm doing top-line revenue of, $100,000 a month. Can I get a line of credit? Because the bank will say, I'm sorry, you're trafficking in illegal business. You're trafficking in what is considered federally illegal. We are regulated by federal laws, and we are not allowed to offer you services.
It's terrible. And I've watched so many people really, really struggle with this. So many small business owners who are wonderful business owners. And to be taxed at that level, have no access to capital, and to be expected to follow the letter of the law. It's no wonder the bad actors are winning.
Absolutely.
And how do any of the good ones survive then?
Well, I will tell you, there was a day, because there's if you look at the economics of this potential industry and the total addressable market, there's a lot of upside opportunity to demand. And 4 or 5 years ago, starting 4 or 5 years ago, there were a lot of people who were seeing the potential for movement. One, new states coming online and legalizing cannabis sorry guys, forgot to turn told you things are going crazy. President Trump and this, so I forgot to turn off so I just ignored that and just note that I'm having one of those mornings in This is real time, folks. This is like being really in my world. So how do the folks survive? So there was at one point, there was a lot of money that came in, but that money didn't last. And so if you were part of that and you were able to be really, really conservative or make sure that your cash flow was supporting your expenses, maybe you survived. But I will tell you, even the big guys are falling apart now because their debt is coming due. There's no new capital. There's no money for acquisitions. Valuations, were before valued really, really high, and now they're valued really, really low. And so they can't get debt on the new value because the values dropped so much. I mean, the economic case study for an MBA program is going to be fascinating on our industry. But the long and the short of it is we are not an investable industry right now. Small players can't get in. If a small player can stay in, it's by the skin of their teeth. And we're all getting our shirts, was it clocks cleaned, whatever, because of the unregulated gas station weed, convenience store, kind of that whole synthetic THC, because they have no regulations, no guardrails for entry, no burdens, and they're hand over fist. They're making money hand over fist on regulated cannabis. So it's a bit of a perfect storm of disaster at this moment.
I have a product question about it.
Sure.
Say someone got gas station weed and then they got a regulated place weed. Would they say it's a gummy or whatever, something you smoke in a joint, whatever? Could they like taste or feel the difference?
So that's a very good question. So the answer is most likely yes. Depends on how the gas station product is prepared. That's why I didn't want to say that everything you buy outside of the dispensary it's not everything is bad. It's just you just don't know. I don't participate in D9 products. I do have friends that have had D9 products and then regulated cannabis, and they do say that the intoxicating effect feels different. Some people kind of swear by it, like they like it. The thing is you just don't know. It's a bit of a crapshoot. You do not know.
And I think for your friends, you know, the conversation to them to have is, yes, okay, running to the gas station's convenient. Yes. But if this is something that's going to be a long-term part of your recreational enjoyment, safety, thinking about the fact that eventually you may have children involved in all of this, also, the variety of products and the things that you can get from a regulated dispensary, in my opinion, there's more options. I think you have everything from, so Cody, there's like tinctures, there are suppositories.
Yeah, tinctures, by the way, is like when you put oil underneath your tongue. I just want to make sure folks know what it is.
I've heard of that. I figured it was like a drink.
Yeah.
Okay. There's suppositories.
Yeah. Vaginal and anal, like there's both. Yep.
Oh, Saphira, so much information today.
I know. You guys know I'm going to tell you all the things.
There's lots of different things you can eat. So, I mean, everything from Rice Krispie treats to chocolates to gummies to all sorts of different things. There's hard candies. There's all different types of things you can smoke. There's different types of vapes. There's
powder you can put in your water.
Yes. So there's a lot.
Cool.
There's a lot in the market that is really innovative and interesting. And you don't just have to take what crappy thing they're selling at the gas station. So I do think there's upside there. Cody, I'll also say if this is ever something you explore, I also feel like you will have a better idea of what, if you ate half of a 5 milligram gummy and you felt pretty good about it, and the next time you wanted to have double that, you would know kind of more consistently how that's going to make you feel.
And 5 is low.
It's enough for me.
It's an entry point that, you know, particularly if you're going to do it and you're not having ingesting any other intoxicating substance, like not alcohol, and you're doing it at bedtime. I would say if you're a very first time consumer, purchase a 5 milligram gummy that is half CBD, half THC. If you're trying to do it for sleep, you want to put something called CBN. So that's another constituent. Remember I told you there's more than 100. So you'll want a gummy with CBD, a good one-to-one relationship between CBD and THC. So you want there to be as much CBD and the more CBD, the better for me. And I love a lot of CBN. That's great for me.
Okay, explain what all that is.
Yeah. So I don't want to get again into all of the proper words of it. So cannabis has well over 100 constituents. CBD is the one we've been talking about. That is what you're seeing in Whole Foods. And that is cannabidiol. And that is what many children rely on for epilepsy, that people use for sleep, that people use for inflammation, but it has no intoxicating effect on your body. Okay. THC is the constituent that's the thing that people are kind of up in arms about because it does have an intoxicating. It's the one that makes you feel loopy. And the more that you have, the more you quote unquote, the high that you experience or the relaxation you get. Other constituents, CBG, for example, CBN. I mean, I could just like go tick, tick, and I don't even know all of the attributes, but the they call it the entourage or the holistic effect of putting these constituents together, and your body, which is within your body, you have an endocannabinoid system, so a system inside your body. The receptors there that's what creates the impact on your body. And when Dr. June Chen comes, she'll talk about it more on how some of the research is designating what constituents are good for what ailments. But when you go in and you want to try something and you want to do something for sleep, a great entry point is to get you ask for a gummy that has only 5 milligrams of THC and has a 1-to-1 ratio of CBD and THC. So it has at least 5 milligrams of CBD. You can go higher in the CBD, no problem. And ask for it to have CBN. And the combination of those 3 constituents with a max of 5 milligrams is a great starting place. And if you're doing it for the very first time, cut that sucker in half, take 2.5 milligram and go to bed.
This is really like science.
Yeah. And I'm doing like a first grader's job of the science. I mean, there are people who spend, their entire I'm trying to make it accessible for what does a consumer who wants to try, or a beverage. I mean, the beverage, those are D9. So I'm not going to recommend beverages. You can get beverages inside your dispensary. I would do a 5 milligram beverage inside your dispensary. Or if it's 10 in a can, it's 2 servings, pay attention to your serving size.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always say it might be a little frustrating the first couple times, but start with less, give yourself a half an hour, see how you feel, then maybe add some more. Especially when obviously when I smoke, it's pretty immediate versus when you ingest, there's a time lapse where you have to sort of see how you're going to feel. The other thing is, I don't recommend when you're first learning about cannabis and how it is with your body, I don't recommend mixing it with alcohol because you really don't know what's going to happen and how you're going to feel. And you're also not going to have a very good gauge of what the cannabis did versus the alcohol. I know a lot of friends who like to have very small amounts of like a cannabis gummy when they're already drinking. But they are people that have done this for a long time, right? They kind of know how that's going to give, what the effect's going to be. But I don't recommend that when you're first sort of learning and understanding. I do have a question for you, Saphira. Since I watch all of my old lady friends with their joints and their pains rubbing this CBD cream all over themselves. Mm-hmm. How's that work? And does it work? Or do we just...
Yeah. So I think different people are getting some, I mean, obviously it's how much the cannabinoid can go into the skin, but some of the higher THC creams, I mean, I think people are having some good results. Particularly if you can find like CBD, THC, and arnica mixed together. And I think they're getting some joint reprieve. CBD there is some research that just taking CBD alone orally or with either with a gummy or a tincture does help with inflammation in the body.
Okay.
And of course, that joint pain is, I mean, again, I'm not a doctor, but it's most likely caused from inflammation and arthritic contribution. So I don't know that it hurts to try. I don't know that it helps everybody. I think it probably depends on what the cause is. But I know folks that get a lot of good result from it.
I did listen to a conversation the other day that I wanted to butt in, but it wasn't my place to really say much. But there was a college athlete who had hurt her back, and someone else was recommending a cannabis cream. I'm assuming it was CBD only, but I don't know. And they were worried that the girl was going to fail a drug test at school.
Yeah, they should be.
Is that a concern?
Absolutely. There was a nurse in Ardmore, Oklahoma, who was at my dad's hospital, who was using a CBD tincture. CBD, remember, no intoxicating effect.
Great.
But in your system...
doesn't know the difference.
System doesn't know the difference. So a cannabinoid stays in your system for 30 days. And even though there's no impairing effects of a CBD, even like, the morning after your THC, when you're not feeling impaired, then any kind of feeling of being impaired or feeling like you're, drowsy or anything, that's all gone away. The presence of the cannabinoid stays in your system from a blood test. It absolutely is an issue. And I don't know if the blood test distinguishes between, CBD. I don't think it distinguishes between CBD or THC. It just says cannabis in your system.
Uh-oh.
big issue. Testing for impairment and the presence of cannabinoids in your system, that's a big deal because, I mean, it's one, you want people to have access to, would you rather them have like come in the next morning from having narcotics in their system or a CBD? Like this is another area of problem, but because it's a Schedule I drug, we can't research it and develop these more modern solutions for what is a very common problem for millions of Americans.
That is
from really Schedule I to Schedule III. When people talk about opening research, it's definitely research for ailments. It's research for, how does it impact with neurodegenerative diseases or help treat, conditions and symptoms of having cancer. But it's also, how do we make sure we're developing tests so you can allow people to access this medicine and not have negative implications in their everyday lives?
One of the most impactful things that I've ever seen was very early on in working with you, Saphira. You had me come down to the Hill and you had a couple people testifying to how cannabis had affected their lives. And one of them was a young girl who had suffered from many seizures a day for her whole life. Yeah. Until her parents were able to get access to medical marijuana to help manage her seizures. Yeah. And to watch these parents and the emotional effect of how much they had changed their daughter's life. Yeah. It was one of those moments where I thought, how can we, and the fact that was probably almost 8 years ago, Saphira?
Oh, it's not that long ago. Yeah. When you look at people who
we haven't made progress at a federal level to help people. And there was also a former NFL player who had suffered from many.
Kyle Turley is his name. Yeah, he was a very accomplished player from the New Orleans Saints. Yeah.
And he was at the point where he had rage issues. He was acting out. He was worried that he was going to hurt his wife. And he was able to use medical marijuana in order to help calm the effects of all the brain damage that he had suffered playing football.
Well, and also like the lifelong, like the pain, like they were giving these folks opioids, and we know what happens when people have constant use of opioids. Like,
yeah. So thank you for doing all this good work for us, Saphira. I think
being interested in it.
This is really important. I'd love to have another conversation where we talk a little bit just about product and recommendations.
Yeah. I'm working with a doctor to come on and give the science behind it and make some real specific recommendations on how to go in as a smarter consumer, because I think that is going to be a key to making people, our community, feel comfortable to enter the space and access this plant medicine for health and wellness.
Well, let's hope so. All right, Cody. So the first time you want to go for a little run to the shop. Oh, Cody, I forgot to tell you, I'm coming to visit you.
Oh my God, fun. When are you coming to New York?
All right, I'm going to be on Long Island on Labor Day weekend. Are you going away?
I don't know yet. I haven't finalized any plans.
Okay, well, I will be there. Yeah, make it a little trip out. I'm going to take the ferry down from Cape Cod. I'll go to Connecticut, take the ferry, go see my family in Mattatuck. I've got some people to visit in Huntington, and I figured,
cool.
If you'd like to be on my Long Island jaunt,
yes,
I'd love to see you.
Perfect.
Tell your dad that I want to hang out.
Okay.
And then obviously your mom too.
Right, I guess.
Yes, yeah, obviously. All right. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate all your knowledge, Saphira. And my fingers are crossed that there's some major action taken this week, that we look at laws changing. I think your life would be a hell of a lot easier.
Oh my God. I feel like losing the football. I've been working on this since November the 7th, 2017. And I am absolutely ready for there to be some meaningful change.
I am too, for you.
Good thoughts, good prayers.
I care about that, let me tell you. Well, thanks, guys. We hope as you make your cannabis decisions in the world, you'll thank us later when you are a little more informed. Have a good one.